Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Zach Smith. I'm part of the ACR QNS staff. And today I'm going to be talking about wrapping up your 2022 MIPS submission. And let's get started. Just a reminder to everybody, we do record these and we post them on our website. We'll also send a link to the recording to everyone who registered. So be looking out for that. It might take a couple weeks to get this one, just with the holidays coming up. I'm not sure how quickly we can get it posted, but we will get that to you. If you have any questions today, just enter them into the Q&A box. We should have a good amount of time at the end for questions, so we'll be reading all those out loud and answering those for you. So here's what we're going to cover today. We're going to talk about some key dates for 2022. We're going to go over just some reminders about data upload and performance report review. And then we're going to talk about how to actually submit that data to CMS. I'm going to talk a little bit about a CMS data audit that's coming up soon. And then we're going to use the rest of the time for discussing some upcoming changes in 2023, and then the rest of the time for Q&A. So here are those key dates and deadlines. So as you know, December 31st is the day that the 2022 MIPS performance period will end. Now, we do give you until January 31st, 2023 to have all of your data uploaded. So if you haven't uploaded most of 2022 yet, please try to get that done as soon as possible and try to have it all wrapped up by January 31st. So for February 2023, you'll have some time to review your TIN data and begin selecting your measures. If you find any issues with your measure data, you can resubmit data to the portal and make any corrections that you need to make. And then by March 31st, you'll want to have all of your data submitted to CMS. And that is, the cutoff is 8 p.m. Eastern time for that. And then fast forwarding to summer 2023, usually July or August, that's when your final performance report will be available from CMS. So they'll give you your official score and let you know your exact payment adjustment sometime around the summer. So let's talk a little bit about data upload. Hopefully everybody on this webinar has been uploading data for most of the year. We do say that we want you to have some data submitted by the end of October. So from what I can tell, most people have been uploading throughout the year. And if you haven't, that's fine, but please try to get your data uploaded as soon as possible. I do want to say, even though we expect all of your data to be uploaded by January 31st, we will continue to accept files pretty much through mid-March. Anything after mid-March is really getting too late. But you'll have the month of February and most of March to submit any corrections or updates to your data that you need to make. So if you do look at your measure data and something appears to be incorrect, whether it's the patient population number seems off or the performance rate seems off, the first thing you should do is review your log files in the Upload Data tab, and we'll talk about that on the next slide. But the log file can give you a lot of information about any errors that you may have had or otherwise. So files can be corrected and re-uploaded. Most of you probably already know this, but I think it's worth reiterating. So if you've submitted records already, but you find something to be incorrect in those records, whether it's the incorrect numerator code was given or something like that, you can overwrite the old records by just re-uploading the file with the corrections made to it. So as long as the exam date and the patient information and the exam unique ID match the original record, it will overwrite what was in that original record. So here's what your Upload Data tab looks like. As you know, you can see the status, whether the file was totally successful, whether it was totally rejected, or whether it was successful with warning. Successful with warning typically means that you had some records in the file that were not able to be scored. Most often that means that somebody just has forgotten to put in a numerator code. So all the denominator information is there, but the numerator is missing. So if you see a lot of records that say successful with warning, take a look at your log file, which you can see the big red arrow here that points to the action column where you can download that log file. So take a look at the log file. That'll show you any cases that were rejected. Now, if they're rejected, that typically means there was maybe an incorrect NPI number or just an NPI that hasn't been added to your physician list yet, invalid TIN number, or an invalid CPT code. As you know, some measures do require 2 CPT codes. So if you see an invalid CPT error, make sure that you submit the full required code for that measure. So in some cases, it's going to be a 5-digit CPT code and then an ampersand and then a second 5-digit code. So I've had some people contact me recently with errors like that, and simple correction is just to correct the CPT code and re-upload. And then if you see something successful with warning, you can check in that log file to see whether the numerator code was missing. So any errors you notice on your performance report, check your log files first and make sure that those records were actually accepted. And then if it looks like your data was all correct, then contact us. There may be some bug in the system that's causing the error. So this is just a quick reminder of how to review your performance report. You'll go into the MIPS portal, you'll click on the Performance Report tab, and there you'll see your scores for all of the MIPS and QCDR measures that you've submitted for 2022. If you haven't looked at this already, please go ahead and look at it now. It's a great way to see if everything is coming through correctly, if any measures are missing, or if any physicians are missing. Take a look at that performance report and you can find all the information you need there. You will see a score breakdown for all of the measures, both at the group level and at the individual physician level. So that can be useful. Some groups report as a group, some report as individuals, and some do both, or they kind of wait to make a decision after looking at their scores. And you will see how your score compares to the historical CMS benchmark. So as long as a measure has a historical benchmark, you'll see how you score against that benchmark. And the performance report does update within about 24 hours of you uploading your measure data. So once you've uploaded a file, give it about a day and it should be updated the next morning. So now let's talk about the actual CMS submission process. I should note that the CMS submission isn't entirely automatic. We don't submit to CMS on your behalf. You can submit to CMS using the MIPS portal, but you have to go in and manually select which measures, which improvement activities, and so on you want to submit, and you have to actually click on the Submit to CMS button to transmit it to CMS. So if this is your first time submitting with ACR, just be aware that you do need to go into that tab and submit to CMS. Now, the portal for CMS submission obviously is not open yet. That doesn't open until the performance year wraps up. So sometime in early January, our portal should be ready to submit your data to CMS. This includes quality measures, improvement activities, and promoting interoperability. All of that can be done under the CMS submission tab in your MIPS portal. Now, we do have to receive payment before you're able to submit. So if your payment has not been received, your submission will be blocked until it is received. I believe the invoices should go out also in early January, typically about January 5th. So be looking out for that. It's not available right now, but it'll be available within the next couple weeks. I also want to remind everyone there is not an automatic exemption for non-participation for 2022. So as you know, in 2019, 2020, and 2021, CMS just said, if you submit nothing, we'll give you a neutral score, neutral payment adjustment, we'll treat you as an exempt individual or group. for MIPS. So that was obviously due to the COVID pandemic, 2019 through 2021. That's why CMS allowed just a blanket exemption for not submitting. But for 2022, you have to submit the application requesting the EUC exemption, the extreme and uncontrollable circumstances exemption. And the deadline for that is December 31st. So this is how you get to the CMS submission tab. You'll log into the NRDR portal. You'll click on the MIPS participation portal, click on data collection and reports. And this is obviously how you get to your upload data tab and your performance report tab and all of that. But you'll click on the CMS submission tab to get to your CMS submission options. And what you'll see on that tab is a series of drop downs. It'll start out with just the instructions describing how to submit to CMS, then a drop down to select and submit your quality measures, then a drop down to select and submit your improvement activities, and then, if applicable, you're promoting interoperability measures. Everybody is going to see the tab for promoting interoperability, but obviously a lot of radiologists are exempt from that category. So if your group is exempt, just simply don't do anything under the PI tab. I do want to say you have to submit your quality measures and submit your improvement activities under their respective sections. So if you've selected improvement activities, but you haven't submitted them, you have to make sure you go in and click that submit button. If you only submit quality measures, but you don't submit your improvement activities, that'll come through looking like an incomplete submission on CMS's end. And this is what you'll see when you open up the quality measures tab in your CMS submission. You'll see a list of all of the measures that are available to you. You'll click on the checkbox that says my group is selecting this measure for MIPS reporting. And then you'll mark whether your data is 100% complete or whether it's slightly less than 100%. So as you can see here, you can either attest that what you've submitted is 100% of your exams, or if you've performed more exams than you've submitted to us, then you can enter that total and we'll calculate your data completeness. So, and as you know, for 2022, the data completeness is set at 70%. So as long as you're submitting at least 70% of the patient population for that measure, you'll be able to receive full credit for it. So after you've selected those measures and attested to the data completeness, you'll click on the Save button at the bottom of your Quality Measures tab. And then once you've saved your selections, you'll click on this button here that says Submit to CMS. So it's very important that you click that button because that transmits the information to CMS. If you've only saved your measure selections, it does not get automatically sent to CMS. The Improvement Activities tab is similar to the Quality tab. You'll see a list of your TINs and your physicians, and you'll be able to open up a separate window to select your improvement activities. And then exactly the same as the quality measures, you'll save your selections, and then you'll click on the button that says Submit to CMS. And as a reminder, most radiologists are only required to do either 2 medium-weighted or 1 high-weighted activity. Sometimes we see people that submit 6, 8, 10 improvement activities, and that's really not necessary. There are no bonus points available for submitting extra improvement activities. And if we happen to be auditing your facility, we audit you for all of the improvement activities that you've selected. So, you know, there's no reason to select more than you have to submit, because then you'll just end up producing documentation for more improvement activities than you really need. Now, once you've submitted a performance category, a View Score button will appear. So as you can see at the bottom here, this is a site that has 3 different TINs available to them. And all 3 are available for CMS submission, but only one of them has been submitted. So you can see the one at the bottom with the View Score button. has been submitted to CMS, and you see the date stamp there letting you know when it was submitted. If you see something like this on your CMS submission tab, you'll know that a 10 has not been submitted yet. Now, when you click that View Score button, it will show you a preliminary score for your measures. Obviously, we can't tell you the exact score because in some cases, if there's a non-benchmarked measure, it may come out looking like you're only scoring 3 points, but you may receive a same-year benchmark, and so you may be eligible for more points than that. Also, certain reweighting factors might not be included there. For the past couple years, the cost category has been reweighted at the last minute. So, nobody knew for sure that it was going to be reweighted until CMS made the decision that it was going to be reweighted. So it's a very preliminary score. It's usually pretty close to what your final score is going to be. So it can at least give you some idea of where you're landing in comparison to the performance threshold. And as I was saying earlier, please confirm that all of your required performance categories have been submitted because each category does have its own Submit to CMS button. I also wanted to mention that if you submit to CMS and then you decide later that you want to add some additional measures or you found an error in some of your measures, you re-uploaded your data, and then you decide you want to resubmit to CMS, you can submit again. So if you've submitted once, that's not set in stone. You can resubmit and update your information if anything changes. The only thing you can't do is unsubmit. So if you're planning to get an exemption, if you've applied for the EUC exemption, then you want to make sure you don't submit anything. And if you do submit, even if it's by accident, CMS considers that a submission, and they won't rescind that. So that wraps up how to submit your data and how to submit your data to CMS. So if you have any questions about that, we'll definitely have another webinar, probably around February of next year. So once we're actually in the middle of CMS submission, you may find that you have more questions. As a reminder, right now, it's not currently available. It'll become available in January. So I wanted to give everybody a reminder about something that CMS announced pretty recently. And it's that CMS is conducting their own data validation audit. So this is entirely separate from the audit that they require QCDRs like us to do. So some of you may have been contacted for the audit already. You may be in the middle of submitting data for our audit, but this is entirely separate from that. So don't get the two things confused. This is a CMS audit, which I don't believe they've conducted before. They've just relied on QCDRs to do it. So if you do get selected, they're gonna begin contacting sites in January of next year, and they'll give you 45 days to provide the documentation that they request. Now, I assume this is going to include all of the performance categories that were applicable to your 10 or your NPI. So if it was only quality and improvement activities you submitted, then they're probably going to be requesting documentation for quality and improvement activities. An important thing to note is that this is not an audit of 2022 data. This is an audit of either 2019, 2020, and or 2021. So I'm not sure if they're going to select you for just one of those years or for all three or for whatever years you participated. So you'll just have to stay tuned and see if they contact you. I have to assume, just based on the large volume of physicians that are reporting to MIPS, that it'll be unlikely that you'll be selected, but I don't make any promises. I'm hoping that they don't audit a large amount of physicians. So hopefully this won't affect you, but we have to let you know just in case it does. And especially if you're already in the middle of an ACR audit, we don't want you to be blindsided if you also receive a CMS audit. So again, that'll come out in January. So just be on the lookout for a contact from CMS. So now that we've wrapped up 2022, I wanted to give everybody a bit of a heads up about some changes that are happening in 2023. I will say that fortunately not a whole lot has changed for 2023 and not many measures were removed. The ones that were removed weren't particularly popular with radiologists, so hopefully you won't be affected. One big thing is that the performance threshold is going to stay at 75. That's what it is for 2022 as well. So while that is pretty high and it's still going to be difficult to achieve a positive adjustment, it's at least not going to be any higher for next year. There is a pretty significant change to the measure scoring this was proposed to start in 2022, but they decided to delay it to 2023. But as you know, for the first several years of the MIPS program, all measures had a scoring floor of 3, meaning you couldn't score below 3 points if your data was complete for a measure. But beginning next year, they're going to give you the full range of 1 to 10 based on what decile you fall under. So if you do fall below decile 3, you'll get either 1 or 2 points for a measure rather than just defaulting to 3. So that means that QCDR measures may still be one of the only ways to achieve a positive adjustment. And I also wanted to note that there's a pretty significant change that's occurred to measure 145, which I'll go into a little more detail about later. The category weights are staying the same as 2022. They're unlikely to change until the MIPS program is entirely done away with. But as long as MIPS exists, the weights will be 30% cost, 30% quality, 25% promoting interoperability, and 15% improvement activities. Now, obviously, for most radiologists, it just ends up being 85% for quality because cost and PI are reweighted. So don't expect any big changes there with the category weights. So these are the 3 measures that were removed for 2023. They were measure 76, which is the central venous catheter measure, measure 110, the flu shot, and then 111, the pneumococcal vaccination. So 76 is totally done away with. That was a topped-out measure. It's sort of been on the radar for a good few years to be removed. So that shouldn't come as a big surprise. 110 and 111 are being removed not because they're topped out, but because they're being folded into a new measure, which is called adult immunization status. So they basically took all of these disparate vaccination measures and they rolled them up into one single vaccination measure. So we will likely be including that measure for 2023. So it's not like 110 and 111 are entirely gone. It's just they're one big measure now. And we don't have a list of the 2023 benchmarks yet, but these are likely the measures that will be capped at 7 points because they were capped at 7 points in 2022. A lot of them are not particularly popular among radiologists, but we do have some. 147 is one that a lot of radiologists use, and then 360, 364, 406, and 436. So just be aware that you'll still most likely only be getting 7 points if you score perfectly on those measures. One noticeable absence from that topped out measure list is measure 145. So because we submitted this change for this measure, it no longer has a CMS benchmark. That's mostly a good thing. This is a popular measure that a lot of people submit, so that means it likely will get a same year benchmark, but you'll actually be eligible for up to 10 points for that measure now if it gets a same year benchmark. This is one that had been capped at 7 points and was likely to be removed if this change didn't happen. So, you know, hopefully this won't be too negative of a change for you, but overall it means that the measure will stay in the program longer and will be hopefully eligible for more points. So the big change here is that the measure now is only about exposure dose indices. The measure used to accept exposure time and number of images in lieu of exposure dose indices as a way to meet the measure, but we've decided to remove the exposure time and number of images. That was sort of, the exposure time and number of images was a way to compensate for older units that do fluoroscopy that aren't able to provide the dose indices, but we feel that the measure has been around long enough, and that also the mandate for new fluoroscopy units to provide this information has existed for long enough that we think it's fair to remove that from the numerator. So to meet the measure, you'll have to provide one of the accepted dose indices, which is either reference air kerma, kerma area product, or peak skin dose, one of those three. Now, we also added some clarification about reporting those indices. You need to clearly state which of those quantities is being submitted. So in other words, don't just provide the value. So you can see I've provided some examples here. So if your report says something like PSD equals 10 milligray, or kerma area product equals 10 milligray, that would meet performance. But if you were to just say 10 milligray, that would not meet performance because we wouldn't know which measurement you're actually referring to. Hopefully that makes sense to everybody. So as I was saying, the benefit of this change is that the measure will no longer be considered topped out, and it may be eligible for up to 10 points rather than just capped at 7 points. So we have had some people contact us expressing some concern because maybe they have some older fluoroscopy units that aren't able to provide this information. So that means you may not be able to get 100% on this measure anymore, but it's still worth submitting, especially because it'll help establish a same-year benchmark. And it's also possible that you can score 10 points for this measure without having to have 100% performance. So it's a bit of a compromise here. Hopefully everybody understands our logic for changing this measure. We will have the full measure specs available sometime in the next couple weeks. CMS hasn't published them yet, but they will come out before January 1st. So if you want to see the full text of this measure, it'll be available soon. There is a pretty big change for 2023 related to non-benchmarked measures. So this was something that was implemented in 2022, but is going to become a little bit more strict in 2023. So originally, new measures would default to 3 points. Just like all non-benchmarked measures, they would receive a default score of 3 or more if they received a same-year benchmark. But as a way to incentivize the use of new measures, CMS changed their scoring policy for those to say that if the measure is in its first year in the MIPS program, it'll default to a minimum of 7 points, meaning that you can score higher than 7 if it gets a same-year benchmark, but you won't score below 7 for submitting a new measure. Once that measure reaches its second year, it'll only receive 5 points, which is still better than 3. But hopefully this measure is receiving enough submissions that it's on its way to receiving a benchmark. Now, if that new measure doesn't have a benchmark by its third year, then unfortunately CMS will default the score for that measure to 0 points. That is, unless a same-year benchmark is established. We're not crazy about this new scoring change, but it's something that they've been pushing towards for a long time, and it wasn't really possible to keep pushing against it. They did want to implement this for 2022, but because of ACRs and several other public comments that were received, they decided to push it to 2023. So I should say that this change may end up applying to some of the non-benchmarked QCDR measures, and it will likely also apply to measure 145, since 145 is not technically a new measure, even though the numerator has changed. So be aware that for those measures, it may show you a default score of 0 when you go to submit them, but that doesn't mean that you will receive 0 points. As long as that measure receives the same-year benchmark, it will be eligible for more points than that. So obviously, with all of these changes happening to the MIPS measures, and with so many measures being topped out at 7 points, one of the best ways to ensure that you get a passing score for MIPS is to submit QCDR measures. The good news is we will still be offering the same QCDR measures in 2023 as we did in 2022. None of them were removed and none were topped out. We have the same 6 report turnaround time measures, which are reported via the grid registry. We have the 1 DIR measure, ACRAD 34. We still have the 6 Grid 2.0 measures, which you can submit using the simplified submission method if you prefer. And we also have the 9 measures that come from the MSN QCDR, which are also reported via simplified submission. And just a quick note about that simplified submission. This uses a template that's very similar to the MIPS measure template, but it's not identical. So just be aware that if you're submitting MIPS measures and Grid 2.0 measures, which are ACRAD 36 through 42, you will need 2 slightly different templates. We're working on merging those into one, and hopefully for 2023, that'll be the case. But for 2022, you'll still need to use the 2 separate templates. They are uploaded to the same place, which is the Upload Data tab of your MIPS portal, but it's just 2 slightly different templates. So how can you avoid a negative adjustment for 2023? Very similar to 2022. The performance threshold is still 75 points. And I've provided these calculations here to give you an idea of how you need to be scoring on your 6 quality measures. If you're a regular size practice or large practice, and you're assuming that your PI and cost are going to be reweighted, then that means your quality score will be weighted at 85%. And then if you assume that you're getting a full score for the improvement activities category, you can count on that 15 points being added. So if you do the math here, you're looking at a score of 7.05 for each of your 6 measures. Now that's an average score. So if you have some measures that are below 7 and some measures that are above 7, it'll probably equal out to you know, a little bit higher than 7. But the average score should be at least 7. Now for small practices, they put more weight into the improvement activities category. So that means you can assume that you'll get 50 points for completing the improvement activities, and then your quality score will be weighted at 50. And because it has a lower weight, you'll only need to be scoring at least 5 points per measure to achieve the neutral adjustment. And as a reminder, these calculations are just about reaching the neutral threshold. So if you're shooting for a higher score and a higher positive adjustment, you will want to score significantly higher than 5 or 7 points. But yeah, the basic thing I'm trying to communicate is you want at least 7 points per measure if you're a large site, and at least 5 points per measure if you're a small practice. So to bring everything to a conclusion, you should be working on finalizing your measure data uploads for 22 now, and targeting January 31st for totally completing your file uploads. We say this every year, but I want to remind everyone, please try to submit all of the measures that are available to you, because this really helps establishing a benchmark. Especially for non-benchmarked measures, if you're able to submit them, even if you're getting a bad score on them, please submit them to CMS. If you have the measure data available, but you don't submit it to CMS, then that doesn't actually go into the benchmarking process, which means that the measures will be more likely to be removed in the future. So by submitting a non-benchmarked measure, even one with a low score, you're helping in creating a benchmark for that measure and improving the longevity of the measure in the program. And now CMS still only scores you based on your 6 best measures. So if you submit more than 6 measures, don't worry if 1 or 2 of them are receiving a low score, because you'll still be scored based on the top 6. I also want to say, start working on your 2023 plan now. Try to be aware of what measures will be available to your practice. And if you want to add some new measures to your repertoire, then work on adjusting any reporting templates that need to be optimized to meet measure performance. That's something you don't want to be doing in the middle of the year when it's kind of too late to get a good score. If there's a measure that you can do 100% on just by making a little bit of tweaking, a little bit of a tweak to your template, then go ahead and do that early. And you can ensure high performance for that measure. And because of the increasing reliance on QCDR measures, if you haven't signed up for GRID and or DIR yet, go ahead and contact us and we can help you get that set up and hopefully get you ready to go for 2023 if you're not already using those registries. So before we get into the Q&A, if you need to submit a support ticket, go ahead and do that at nrdrsupport.acr.org, or just send an email to that address, nrdrsupport@acr.org. That'll open a ticket automatically, and that ticket will be routed to the person who's best able to help you. We've also got a phone line, and we've also got our QCDR webpage, which includes links to all of the measures for 2022, the reporting templates, and all that stuff. Soon we'll have the 2023 information updated on the QCDR page as well. So give that a visit if you haven't, and you can find all you need there. So with that, let's see what kind of Q&A we have. Brendan, if you've been looking at that Q&A, Brendan or Judy, are there any questions you'd like to read out loud?
There are about 5. I will try to start from the top. So we got an initial question. This is from Beth Philippe. It is, what if one of the unique identifier elements was missing? Excuse me. It is, what if one of the unique identifier elements was missing in original upload? Will the record overwrite? Do we have to remove the rejected record?
That's a great question, Beth. I'm glad you asked that one because that is one of the kind of tricky things about overriding records. So if for some reason that original unique ID was incorrect, you will need to reach out to us and have us remove the records for you. So it's unfortunately not something you can do on your end, but our IT team can remove those. Typically, the easiest thing to do if it's a lot of records that were affected is, we can just remove all of the data for one of your measures and have you re-upload everything fresh. If it's just one record, we can remove that too. So that'd be a great thing to open a support ticket about if you need help with that.
Can I add to that, Zach?
Please.
If the unique identifier was missing, then the file would be rejected. So all you would need to do is submit the record again with the identifiers.
That's a great point. If you do see that a record was completely rejected, then it didn't go into our system at all. So you can just correct it, re-upload it, and it'll be like it's brand new. So yeah, that's why it's important to look at the log files to know if something was accepted, but there was an error, or if it was completely rejected outright.
Okay, next question is from Tom Saker. It is where to find specific specifications for MEDNAX 55 and QMM 20 measures. Example, numerator response value, numerator codes, denominator codes, etc.
Thank you, Tom. That's a good question too. So we've got 2 different documents that provide information for those. You can find all of it on the QCDR webpage here. So probably the easiest document to look at, it's called the 2022 Simplified Measure Specifications. So that shows you, it's ACRAD 36 through 42 and the MSN measures, and it shows you exactly what the CPT codes, the diagnosis codes, and the numerator responses should look like. We also have a document that includes the full specifications for all of the QCDR measures. It's a really long document, unfortunately, so you kind of have to just Control F for whatever measure you're looking for. But it depends. If you're looking for really detailed information, you can go there. If you're just looking for the coding, you can go to the Simplified Specifications document, and that's all on acr.org/QCDR.
Okay, next question is from Carrie Menzing. It is, when will we find out if any QCDR measures would be benchmarked for 2023 or potentially retro benchmarked for 2022?
That's also a good question. So most likely that'll be after the March 31st deadline. So it's hard to know if anything is going to receive a 2022 benchmark until the data has all been submitted to CMS. So I would say typically around the time that the final scores come out in the summertime, that's when you'll see the official benchmarking results for all the measures. The 2023 benchmarks should be posted soon, and some of the QCDR measures that were not benchmarked may end up getting a benchmark just because of 2021 submissions, but we'll just have to see. Hopefully in the next couple months, the 2023 benchmark file should be available. But that is a little bit different for the same year benchmarks for 2022. That's a separate document that comes later.
Okay, next question is from an anonymous attendee. It is just, is cost reweighted this year?
So CMS hasn't said that for sure cost is going to be reweighted for everyone. That is what happened the previous 2 years. So 2020 and 2021, nobody in the program got a cost score. It was all reweighted. Now, for most radiologists, it's reweighted regardless. So most likely it will be reweighted for your practice if you're standard diagnostic radiology. But yeah, we typically don't find out that it's just a blanket reweighting until after March 31st.
Next question is from Tom Saker. It is, what format is needed for the measure number? Example, ACRAD 40, ACRAD 40 again, MEDNAX 55, etc. Example, with or without space?
Gotcha. So those are without space. And for the ACRAD measures, they will actually have a Q in front of them. So it would be Q ACRAD 40 with no space. For the MSN measures, it's just exactly like it's written in the file. So MEDNAX 55 with no space. And the reason that we put the Q in front of the simplified measures is it's sort of just a weird little thing with our system where we, because we have two different collection methods for something like ACRAD 40, where you can be uploading the data through the grid registry, or you can upload the data through the MIPS portal. We have to have some kind of code to differentiate the ones that come from grid and the ones that come from the simplified submission. So the Q is what denotes that it came from the MIPS portal.
And then Carrie Menzing again asks, how are we able to tell what year a measure is in?
That's a tough question. I assume that the 2023 benchmark file will maybe have a little bit more information about that, but it typically comes from the CMS benchmarks. So I can't remember off the top of my head, but I believe there's some sort of indicator of how long a measure has been topped out, if it's on the topped out timeline. Now, for brand new measures that are defaulting to 7 or 5 points, depending on how long they've been in the program, I'm not sure how CMS is planning to represent that information. I don't think that info is in the 2022 benchmark file, but hopefully they'll adjust something in the 2023 benchmark to, give people some sort of indication if a measure is going to default to 0 points. If they don't provide it, we'll just have to provide that ourselves, just because we know how long our measures have been in the program. I will say we don't have any measure that's so new that it's defaulting to 7 or 5, at least not in our QCDR measures. I did mention the new adult immunization measure that's being added for 2023. Now that measure is in its first year. So that will be defaulting to 7 points.
And then Zach, lastly, as of now, we do have one hand raised from Donald Miller, so I believe he has a question.
Sure, let me find you and I'll unmute you, Donald, 1 second. All right, Donald, if you're there, I'm unmuting you real quick. Hey, can you hear us? Sorry, I have you on here twice, so maybe I unmuted the wrong line first. Do you still have a question? If not, I'll just unmute you. All right, that may have been an accidental hand raise, but Donald, if you do have a question, feel free to type it in the Q&A. We'll give everybody a few more minutes to get in some more questions. All right, we're not seeing any more hands or any more questions. So I'll go ahead and start wrapping up here. So just a reminder, if you have any questions for us about 2022 or questions about the upcoming MIPS year, feel free to open a ticket with us or send us an email. Like I said, we will have some more information posted on our website within the next couple days with the 2023 QCDR measure specs at least, and hopefully the 2023 MIPS measures soon. Like I said, those haven't been published yet, so hopefully we'll get those before the holidays. Well, I just want to say thank you to everybody that joined. Sorry, was somebody?
Sorry, Zach, I think Donald has finally got his line open, maybe? Donald? All right, sorry, maybe not. You can go ahead, Zach.
Okay. Well, since we don't have any more questions, I just wanted to thank everybody for joining us today. Really appreciate you hopping on, especially since we're so close to the holidays. I know a lot of people are going to be out of office soon. So I just want to wish everybody a happy holidays and thank you so much for joining, and reach out if you have any questions. All right. Thanks so much.